guess we can get started. So as usual, we will stop promptly at 12:45 because I know many of us have 1 o'clock classes and other duties and so forth. Maybe we should all introduce ourselves just because we have some new faces. So I'm Scott Lukas. I've taught, welcome back, Wynn. I've taught anthropology, sociology here for 21 years, something like that, and I'm starting a new role this year, faculty chair of teaching and learning. So actually what we're doing today is part of that role. This is our second one of these teaching talks, and I'll talk a little bit later about what the focus is going to be today. But welcome all, and welcome those of you virtually as well. So.
Okay. My name is Loudon. I am the dual enrollment and outreach program coordinator. And actually, my thesis and my master's, my focus of my education has always been environmental education with emphasis on eco-pedagogy, which is an offshoot of critical pedagogy. So I just came to geek out with you guys and get to know you.
Great. If you see me getting up, by the way, I'm not being rude. It's just we're constantly reconnecting, so the Wi-Fi is being weird. Okay. Thanks and welcome. We love. Dual enrollment is such a great area of growth for us, and there's a lot of just excitement about expanding our mission here.
I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, so welcome aboard.
Absolutely, thanks.
John Duerk, history of political science, my second year here. I'm not new to education, so.
Okay.
Behnaz, Gangursky, I teach anatomy and physiology. This is my I'm Stephanie Snyder. I've been here since this college was a motel on Highway 50. Off and on, I come and go. This time I'm teaching public speaking.
Yay, welcome back.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. And thanks again. Many of you came last week. I appreciate the attendance this week. So.
Wynn Walker, I'm a math instructor, been here about 10 years.
Larry, every day he has a math shirt on. How do you have so many math shirts, Larry?
I just get one every year, so I've been for a long time.
Okay, I'm impressed. So, and you are Dr. Larry Green, and you
Larry
teach.
Green, I teach math, obviously, and it's my 24th.
Okay, cool. Wow. Welcome back again. Cata, hold on.
Hello.
And just doing introductions. So you are?
Oh, my name is Goralski and I teach Spanish.
Yay. Okay, well, welcome. And those of you virtual, we hear the issue is Denny's. And the hypothesis is that too many people are eating Grand Slams at the moment, if we still do Grand Slams. So it's causing some sort of rift in the space-time continuum and causing the Wi-Fi here for college to go off. So, hey.
Hello.
Hey, welcome. We're actually just doing introductions, so have a seat and introduce yourself.
Okay. You first, Maria.
Great.
Mircheva. I teach math and environmental science, and I'm an adjunct at LTCC.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm Sara Pierce. I teach Spanish and I run the World Languages Department alongside the company.
Okay, welcome. This is our best attendant. I really appreciate everyone coming, having conversations about teaching. If you're watching our live stream, it is maybe going in and out because of our Wi-Fi issues. So the focus this week is, hi, Mary Cook, and you teach English.
English.
Welcome. We have such a great packed house today. So the focus this week, with the flyer I passed out, if you had a chance to see this, maybe in your email, I was very interested in the idea that we all teach in different disciplines, and we don't have counseling faculty, but you may not work directly, say even in a teaching position, you might coordinate teaching. So the conversation I thought we would have today is how can a person in one discipline, like me in anthropology, I have maybe a particular teaching technique, it could be a strategy of managing a class, it could be distance education, incarcerated student program teaching, or face-to-face, or I actually have a content area that somehow connects to, say, world languages. So what can we do collaboratively as faculty to use an idea in our discipline that's content specific, or use a technique or an approach that you think would be generally useful for a classroom strategy, whether it's distance education, face-to-face, and so forth. Does that make sense as a prompt to start thinking off with for the day? So that being said, who wants to take a first stab at a concept or a technique, and maybe if you look at the disciplines in the room, or if they're not represented in other disciplines, say how that might relate to what someone else is doing teaching-wise.
You're looking at me.
Well, you kind of have that, like, when you say something.
Well, public speaking, that is what we, at the foundation of pretty much of education. And it's so there's got a lot, you make a connection with your audience, not only based on what you're teaching them, but also your techniques in getting that information across to them. Making sure that you're not talking in this monotone like this and it sounds like you're Very good, very good. Making connections with them, looking them in the eye, that sort of thing. Improving those public speaking skills can really help you to get across to your students and keep them away.
Can I just jump on this? So last night, actually, I teach the Promise class, 3 sections, and if you're new to the Promise program, it's focused on providing students a lot of financial and wraparound support at the college, student services, etc. And then in exchange, we hope that they're going to graduate and persist. And I was just talking about this last night, so I was saying, like, when you take a class, whatever it is, and obviously if you take a language class or a speech class, you're getting like direct practice daily with language and public speaking. You have to do presentation. Trevor was talking about how world languages will often have a video, and if it's a DE class, they record that to make sure that that student's actually speaking. Well, so I was saying to my students last night, like, one skill you really need is just to learn how to be a student, how to speak like a student. Like if you go in for a job interview, you're working on, something in your community, you have to give a presentation. So I was really stressing that to say, like, you're going to be expected in your other classes to talk and to give presentations, but more importantly, when you go out into the real world, and many of our students are already working, of course, you're expected also to have those speaking skills. So for me, doing the Promise class, it's almost like going back to the building blocks and saying, here's how you take notes in your textbooks, here's how you do this, and here's how you approach working on public speaking. You might have to give a presentation in a class. You might have to speak in your language classes. So this is I think, just like a key area. So can we build on that? Do others of you, I know language, you cover this extensively, but like in a history poli-sci class, do students have to speak in your class? Do they need those kinds of skills that Stephanie is talking about?
Yes, and informally. I think that we probably all had a history class where the information flowed unidirectionally from the instructor to the students. So what I've done in the last couple of years, I started to transition away from that, and also transitioning away a bit from exams. And but I don't want to say the first point. The first point is, like, for example, what I started doing in history is we'll do, it's chronological, we'll do chapter by chapter, and I let them choose what they think the 5 most important developments are from that specific chapter. And so there's more buy-in from them, and then we spend, I would say 45 minutes talking about what it is they chose, instead of me just telling them, like, here's this happened, and that happened, and this, and that. And then they have the opportunity to speak. And what we typically do is we spend, 20 minutes in groups of 4 to 5 people, and each person gets to talk about the items on their list, then we open it up and we spend about 20 to 25 minutes of discussing it as a class. And then I'm more of a facilitator, and they're talking about the items on their list. And so I think it's a different approach to history, just because if it's only me, and that's pretty much what I had as an undergraduate, my major, was somebody talking about it. So they have the opportunity to speak.
I think that's more of a common experience for us here, right? It's like that class conversation. You can't always do it. Maybe sometimes you're lecturing on some content, you need to have that to be the focus. But for me, one of the transitions teaching at a university and coming into the college ages ago, in the late 90s, that was a big transition because I was so used to lecturing because that was the norm in the university. And then here it's like, small group work, right? And it takes a while to get up to speed and think about what are some techniques, like even something as simple as keeping students on task, because if you say, I want you to discuss this concept in history, and then the students are talking about what they did over the weekend, there's always that keeping people on track kind of thing. But I think that excitement of getting students to speak, even informally in groups, is a really great opportunity.
I wanted to weigh in on that. So eco-pedagogy, which I study, he's talking about the transition from the stage-on-stage model. And there's this really amazing article by Julie Drew that reimagines students as travelers. and recognizes that they learn in every single space that they're in. So I would argue that them talking about what they did on the weekend is equally as valuable, potentially, for the disciplinary. You know, it can be tied in because everything is about creating networks and connections between knowledge and disciplines and ideas. And so they're learning in every space that they're in. And we have to move away from a classroom being conceptualized as the only learning space with valuable knowledge.
And then just thinking as an asterisk, just to think about for the future, how do we do this with DE? I struggle with this because what we're doing here, right, when you do this in a distance format, it's a much more, for me, it's much more challenging because text, it's so slow and you're not seeing people's faces and expressions and so forth. But I think you're right, like just getting students engaged in conversation is a first step for them to feel comfortable, particularly if it's a history class and they think like, how can I relate to history? And it's so overwhelming and bigger than I am, so this is an opportunity to connect.
And also giving them the opportunity to choose.
Yeah.
I think a big part of this is letting them choose. I don't choose for them. And when people get to choose for themselves, there's more of an investment in that, as opposed to someone imposing upon them and saying, well, you're going to do this. And I know that doesn't always work in all disciplines necessarily, but I think there are be different ways of incorporating, giving people that ability to make that choice for themselves.
Behnaz?
I agree with him about giving them choice. For anatomy and physiology, I asked the students from the beginning of the quarter pick up some of the subjects, like some of the, like we have like chapter just bones or muscles. So students interested in bones, I asked them, go find out 3 diseases about bones by yourself, whatever you want, and tell me the latest, what is that disease, what's the treatment, the latest research about that disease, come and do presentation. And most of the time they have like families that have that disease or some problems. They bring up and I see some of them when they teach, they say, yeah, you have heard when Behnaz taught us about this disease, then they add more information into it. I see they listen more, they learn more, rather than just hear it from me, just boring, standing up in front of class, do lecture. They get involved, they do that presentations by themselves and they learn it better. It's very helpful. Most of the students are good for presentation, but sometimes I have like maybe one whole quarter, she comes to me like say, hey, it's very hard for me to go in front. I had a student, she told me it's very hard for her to go stand up in front of the class and do the presentation. And honestly, I didn't know what to do. It came to a level that I saw she's almost going to cry in front of me, and I didn't push her for going in front of the class. So I'm happy you brought this up to ask you guys your experience. What would you do with a student like that? Like I know, like graduate we want to get her involved to talk in the class, or I did some group activities, ask her speak, but especially she was sensitive to come and stand up in front of the class and do the presentation. And
Sara?
Well, something that I do in the classroom is I practice to make them talk in front, and if someone is not feeling comfortable talking in front of the class, what I do, I rearrange the classroom so they're not in front, you know? So the spatial perception, the space perception is different just to be in front of an audience. It's more like you integrate it with them.
Or even if she were to stand where she is in her desk.
Or where she feels comfortable.
You know, where she's comfortable there, she's just standing up, but she's not feeling like she's in front of the classroom.
So some people get very anxious of just being observed in front. But if, as Sara said, they are in their own chair, or even if you make like a round and she's on her desk, that makes her feel more comfortable. And related of what you're saying about, it's all about, in languages, it's about activating previous knowledge of words, experiences, and how to bring them into your discipline. And my discipline is Spanish. And okay, well, you know that word. Whoa, cool. And they know even with hola, ¿cómo estás? You know, like, so is that, and then how do you make the content that you're teaching meaningful to them? And that's part of making them choose what chapters they want or what experiences they can apply to your content.
And I'll just add that I acknowledge their fear because it's very common, especially in language, for them to be terrified for the first skit or the first presentation. And I acknowledge, and I say from the very first day, do you know that there's a bigger fear around public speaking than death? This is serious. I mean, this is serious. And there's absolutely, I validate their feelings. And I go, and then you do it in another language, man, this is terrifying.
Right.
And I absolutely let them know that I recognize that this is a fear and that every one of them feel at some point that kind of same fear. I felt that fear as a student. I share that with them to say we're all here. This is a very safe place. You're all going to be able to get up and do this, and it's going to be good. And like I shared last teaching talk that we had, I had one student who literally threw up every single time he had to speak in front of a class. He told me this, and by the end, now he's in one of our theater classes and doing very well. But I think it's like giving those little baby steps to say, okay, I'm just going to start with from my desk. I'm going to start maybe in a group of 3, and then I'm going to hopefully by the end of the quarter, you're going to move to the front and you're going to do great. And so it's not always easy.
Yeah.
And some students, it's a real fear.
I actually shared my own experience. As a student, I had a fear going to in front of class, and I told the student, look at now I'm here, and I'm standing up here, and I'm teaching.
Exactly.
You will be the same. That's very normal.
Yeah.
But those are pretty good ideas. We start from there and just keep them remote, maybe change the slides and talk about it.
And I was just going to say, just real quick, I think like sharing your own fears with the class, if you feel comfortable with that vulnerability, is great. Like last night I had this, not related to public speaking, but I showed my class my very first college paper with all the red marks and stuff to try to like lend some idea, like I've been through it, I get it. And so, I mean, it might just be useful to share that in class and say, I used to be really terrified about speaking in public, or maybe I still am. I know faculty are still like don't want to be on camera or whatever, So like we've all been there and done that, and I just think sharing that vulnerability with your class is excellent. I don't know Mary or Stephanie wants to brush him over. Mary.
So along those same lines, I was wondering because occasionally I get a class of all introverts. And I teach writing, composition, and literature, and so class discussions are a huge part of my teaching style, and the value of the student voice is paramount in my classroom. So I'm wondering if you guys have any techniques that you find particularly effective if you get a class full of introverts, and things that work to draw them out of their shell and to make them feel comfortable to share and discuss the readings and discuss their own writing in front of one another and in front of me.
That's tricky. A class of introverts. Like the whole class?
Like there might be like one or two talkers who kind of answer your questions every time, and so you get a class of listeners, maybe I should call them. So they're actively listening, but they're not speaking up.
So I don't know. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was really the parent share kind of model. Would really be to say if you have a group of 2 or 3, even if they're all introverts, and maybe I'm sharing. It's not mine, right? But it's Cata's. But I'm able to somehow come up with an idea that she has. It's like parent share, right? So I'm not having to necessarily share my own feelings or my own writings, but I'm able to say, and maybe that'll kind of break the ice a little bit to say, I really liked what she had written. I really liked what she shared with me about this reading. Maybe it would break the ice to say, okay, eventually by the end of the quarter, we're going to try to share our own ideas, but at least it would get them speaking, and maybe it's not as terrifying if it's not about their own writing. Mm-hmm.
That's a cool idea. Yeah.
And then,
or writing class.
a lot of what Sara's saying is like, if you're introducing a topic, maybe saying, what do you know about this? Just like writing pairs, like 3 words that are related to this topic. And then they start reading the words, and that makes the conversation flow a little easier.
Remember Suzanne Roberts shared something in one of the ETWs as well, where she would have them write down instead of saying it, and then pass to the left or pass to the right. So you're really reading maybe something vulnerable that someone's written, and maybe they don't even have to claim it, right? But it's still being spoken about, and then maybe they'll get validation when it's up and go, oh, maybe next time I'll share it myself if the class is receptive to it. And so that's another, I mean, it's still not the same, I know what you mean, areas, them voicing their own, but maybe they're baby steps to get there.
I think having a technique I don't know if I ever had a class of all introverts, but I've had the phenomenon in social science, I think we stress a lot of, hey, what do you think of this issue? And I would always get in a situation where the same 1 or 2 people would just be talkative, right? And so I'd have to think about ways, strategies to break it up, and then I would do small groups and say, okay, each of you have a representative to present to the class, because if it's sometimes like a free-for-all where you just have a class of 30 talking about issues and the same person wants to keep going and going and going, then that one person, to go back to public speaking, is getting that practice, but all the other students aren't. So, but I'm also cognizant that some people are shy and they don't want to talk as much, or they say little short comments. So I feel like having a technique that doesn't seem, over the top and stressful, that's a way maybe just to get conversation going, because I deal with like the 1 or 2 talkative students, and I want to share the wealth with the rest of the class.
Well, and keep in mind that those quiet students, if you gently bring them to that particular realization that they need to speak in class, they're going to get better grades. They're going to know more of their fellow students and gain a network. It's going to affect their lives overall, their career, their happiness. So you're doing them a favor.
Yep.
I know it's not pleasant and it's not fun sometimes, but yeah, kicking and screaming into enlightenment, I think, is a way a friend of mine put it.
Elizabeth and Sara.
To borrow perhaps from the field of psychology, what has worked for me is ground rule setting collaboratively together at the very beginning of the course. So on the very first day, okay, like what are some rules that would make us feel comfortable as a group to talk about these issues? And that way that everyone feels they have a stake in the conversation, and that they're going to be respected, and that they don't have to fear the judgment of other people, and etc. I think that collaborative process has helped me a lot. Like I was teaching a group in Palestine, we talked about a lot of different issues, and it helped build and break down some power dynamic barriers at the beginning, because this conversation also goes back to power.
Of course.
Roles.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, power for sure. So, and could that technique, would it apply to Mary's situation where like the introverted students could set a rule for how they're going to feel comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could do it on note cards, and the first day have them propose rules, then select some from those students. But also you could do it collaboratively as a class and have people all raising their hands and participating in that. You could combine both of them, come back the second course and say, all right, here's our new ground rules. This is what I coded and figured out that everybody in class decided we needed. And we all agree to that. Great, it's flexible.
Sara?
I was just going to mention the DE aspect of this, and I don't know if anybody in here is, I know Larry, you teach online, Cata teaches online, but really if you feel like the same kind of problem exists in an online environment, or do you feel like maybe it's better for those students, or what do you do with the students just not feeling engaged in an online environment? I know JD, maybe that, not to call you out, but in an online environment, if you're having an introverted student, or you're having the student that's not participating, maybe they don't want to put out their, do you have techniques for that? Yeah.
You are on the spot.
You are on the spot. No, I know there are others that teach online, but
it's not there.
It's what?
The spot is not there.
Okay. Repeat that, please.
I just want to put the same question into the online environment. And can we say, what if you're maybe they're introverted, maybe they're just not feeling engaged in a discussion in an online environment? Are there tools, or there ways, or there techniques that you've found, anyone's found, to engage students in an online environment?
I think you probably could do something separate from the online environment. Like you probably could create a parallel in the class for people who, like if you made a requirement to participate in this, and then there are people who didn't participate in class, you could create the option to do it online if they wanted to instead. Because I use the shell for the on-campus classes too.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Like a hybrid kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the point being that you get points for participating and adding your voice to the discussion.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to add that when we talk about introverts, we need to acknowledge if that kind of student is feeling safe sharing what he or she or think, like it happens to me in the Spanish speaker class that is the first class full in Spanish, and we talk a lot about identity, race, ethnicity, and also like in a regular class, one-on-one, what I try to make them feel is like whatever their experiences are, they're going to be safe because it's a college class, and that's where we can open our mind and heart and share it with your peers and learn from them. So maybe that introvert is not that introvert, maybe she's not feeling safe with the classroom structure or the topic we're talking. So I don't know, it's a very fine tune that you need to activate with the students.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, that's something I want to add.
Well, and I think it's what is adding to it, and I think, again, like in social science sometimes if we have a controversial class, I recently taught the race class online, the gender class, and I always talk about safety in those contexts, right? So if it's a gender class and we're talking about sexual assault, or we're talking about something, or it could be a class related to addiction and students who have struggled with some of these issues, I always say, like, you have to be safe and comfortable talking about the issues, and if you're not, you could take a pass on that, right? So like that safety component I think is really important because there's a very good chance that if you're teaching a class and you hit a certain topic, it's going to, like for me, just dealing with some medical situations in my family, like I was at a thing recently, a public talk, and someone was talking about something with medical, and it kind of just hit me emotionally, It's like, so we all have our points where it might push you, and so I always try to say, like, it is a safe space. In the DE environment, I think it's really even harder because then someone starts saying something because you're not on 24 hours a day to worry about, is someone really going to have a reaction based on what someone said in this conversation that happened 5 hours ago? I don't know who's next. No?
I wanted to mention about the faculty should be sensitive about different culture as well. There are different cultures. I had a Japanese friend, she took a culture class one time. We took classes in Folsom Lane College. She told me when I read in this book, many of those, it's same as my culture. Like in Japanese culture, they are very shy to answer a question if it's wrong. They're always in Asian culture, mostly in my culture as well. You speak if you make sure it's correct, that answer, then you speak up for it. So I observed actually a class in this college, I'm not going to say who or where, but the teacher asked a student question. There was an Asian guy in the back of the class. I could see a kind of shy sitting, but the teacher in front of others said, "How about you? You're just quiet, sitting, hiding behind the students. You are not talking." And I noticed that the students kind of hiding behind the other one because he was shy to speak. So it's very important the faculty know different cultures, or in American culture, it's okay, we teach our kids, it's okay if you make a mistake, that's fine. But in those cultures, they feel so much embarrassed to speak something, to say something, it's just if it's wrong. So it's very important faculty be aware of that.
That's great. I think that's like having that awareness. And then maybe also thinking about how can I draw that student out while still respecting the student's culture or their background. Just like great awareness to have that awareness, I think is important.
Perhaps one could invite the student to, as the student leaves the room, I have an office hour at X on X date next time. Perhaps you and I could get together and discuss it between the two of us, and that way I can find out your points of view on this sort of thing, and we can make sure that you're fulfilling your class participation requirements.
And that could also work with the introverted student,
Yes.
where they might feel more comfortable one-on-one with you, and then maybe you say, well, is there anything we can do? And going back to setting ground rules, like maybe you can do that informally outside of class if they feel comfortable. I find, again, with DE, to make that parallel back, it's often hard because we don't have, unless we do video or conferencing, we don't have that same ability, but we can still, so to speak, pull a student aside and in the campus inbox, ask them, hey, can we just talk about this, because I've noticed, you haven't been that active. What can we do to make your participation more comfortable, whatever that might be. So, Larry?
Something you just said, which to me just bothers me, is that we don't have that capability to be able to talk to students multimedia-wise. We do, and everyone should try it. Yeah. It is so important in the online environment to talk to your students.
So Larry, how do you do that?
Yeah, how do you do that?
Statistics class, for example, or any of your classes.
Well, first thing is we have weekly webinars.
Yeah.
So an hour and a half last night is I have webinars with my students, and they interacted, they talked. It's really no different than the face-to-face, except you can't tell people.
Oh, Larry. I don't know. You had me going until that.
Yeah. But I wonder why other faculty don't do that. And then in office hours, I'm on Zoom for office hours. They want to talk to me, I talk to them. And it's, I see them, they see me. They don't have to have their videos showing, but they can.
And then they don't have to come to you. They can just use their device to
They use a smartphone and
It's
whatever.
so much more convenient. Cool.
And not having to show your video, like you can't, in a face-to-face class, have a student put a screen up or something or hide behind a screen, right? But with a webinar, you could say, if you're only comfortable with the audio, right, that might be one way to deal with the shy or introverted student is they just do the audio, and then maybe if they want to later, they do the video. And of course, there's a phenomenon, I've done webinars where it's like, my hair's a mess or something, or my office is all scattered. And I saw on Skype now they have a thing, it'll blur your background so it doesn't look as messy. But I find that, yeah, there's a new thing on there. But so, I think sometimes it's not because the student is shy, but maybe it's just like they don't want, in their pajamas to be on a video conference or whatever. But I love that you can do just the audio and then they're participating and it's real time and you're having that conversation.
Yeah, that's perfect for the student who, like you're saying, Sarah, taking baby steps.
Yeah.
That's a perfect environment to take baby steps because first they can do audio, and then, whenever they feel comfortable, they have the option of doing video.
I'll share one other situation I had online. I had a student with severe Tourette's take Spanish online, and I just want to say that modality for this student was very empowering. It wasn't like, it was a very pretty severe form of Tourette's. And he said that there's absolutely, he tried it in the class, for him it was just in a language class where you're asked to speak and it would be augmented if he were nervous. He was able to really learn Spanish in a very real, meaningful way by taking it in the online environment because he would leave me voice calls and we would talk, but he didn't have that anxiety as much as he would have in a face-to-face setting. And I really think that, as the introverted student may have a difficulty in class, they probably can find their voice, I've seen, in an online environment. And I would say for our ISP students as well, being able to find their voice. So I'm thankful, like you said, because we're giving students that maybe wouldn't be as successful in a class setting really some options.
We should keep a mental note of that exact example you used because Kelly, our new DRC faculty member, and Beth are doing some in-person conversations about DRC students, and they said we want to do a video of this. So I thought maybe this could be an example to use because it's really showing that DE can be a modality to help students who struggle in a face-to-face format because of their disabilities. So that's a really good example to show there's a purpose behind having that option for a student to take that class. Great example. Just pause, yes. That pause. I think we're back live. If you're watching live, hello. Sorry, we've been having Wi-Fi issues today. We hear it's Denny's is the culprit. I don't know how Denny's affects our Wi-Fi, but too many people eating greasy food. I don't know.
Highway construction.
Oh, highway construction.
Yeah.
It's not in
Those
Denny's.
guys,
This whole
those guys.
time, I had this in my head, this grand slam, and someone's like shoveling pancakes down their face, and the Wi-Fi is
Stop.
What? Why am I
It's a barrage of imagery.
Okay. Okay, Maria.
I also make my students talk in groups, and they're much more comfortable talking to their peers, even especially in other cultures, because then I'm superior because I'm older than the teacher, but that's not the same with their peers. So they're silly and share all kinds of stuff. And sometimes I just go around to the different groups and talk to them as a one of them. And then often I do have them present, but they stand together, but only one person presents usually. So whoever's comfortable, so there's more choice. So it's just another way.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the theme is just giving students comfort, so if they are shy and introverted, over time, those barriers break down and eventually they become a little more able to. So hopefully if they take classes with all of us in here, right, like they're eventually going to get it, and then their public speaking, go back to your initial issue.
They'll be great.
They're going to be great, and they're going to be ready.
One other thing is, in a science class, you don't really have to say your opinions. It's more facts, or so you're not embarrassed about that. You're talking earthquake. You're not embarrassed about how an earthquake. So that's easier to present.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
Yeah.
But they're embarrassed to be wrong, especially in math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're often wrong.
Well, how do you deal with that embarrassment? What do you say? What do you do?
You keep positive. You say, this is something a lot of people make mistakes on. I'm really glad I'm really glad you did it this way so that I can point out for everybody else because we're all going to be doing it this way. And sometimes that makes them happy that they actually made a mistake.
And what I also do is if someone, makes a mistake, I also point out what they did right, and how I understand how they made the mistake. It's good you were thinking this way. I can totally see where you're coming from. What happens, this example is just a little tricky, in that you have to treat it a little different way, but, you're totally on the right track and emphasize, what they're doing right.
Call it the Oreo cookie method, right? You give them a little good on the outside, and the inside you give them the bad news, right? You start it and you end it with the good positive, right? It's a good technique.
I was just going to borrow from another discipline, design and engineering, and I really enjoy the take on failure, which I think culturally we need to nurture a little bit better, especially in the educational system. And that's that you prototype things, you try things, you fail forward, you fail quickly, you take risks with low, levels of chance, and then it's okay to just improve and reflect constantly. And so I'm studying this curriculum for career development and for college and career readiness, and it's about that. It's from that perspective. And I really enjoyed that intersection because it's kind of a STEM intersection, but it's a new way to think about failure.
Yeah. I think just telling students, right, it's okay to fail, and that, what Wynn was getting at, you're engaging in the process. I think in social sciences, where it's often not a right or wrong answer. If JD asks about, a historical period, they don't have that quite right. But if it's a conversation on, well, what do you think about our political process, there may not be a right or wrong, and you have to, I think, encourage students along the way and tell them, like, okay, you're engaging with these issues, and it's just important that you have your perspective shown or present in that conversation, because it often is levels of gray versus black and white. In social sciences, there are cases where it is black and white, but I find like the discussions are a little different, and it's not about making a mistake, but it's more that, to go back to your point about safety, there's a little bit of embarrassment, like, what if I'm the only, like in a religion class, what if I'm the only Wiccan in the class? And actually in Dahel there are a lot of Wiccans, but that's an example of something where you feel like, ooh, if I identify my religious or spiritual
You're gonna be
beliefs,
judged about it.
will someone else in the class judge me? And that's why it goes back to that safety, right?
Yeah.
And having the ability to have a safe conversation as well. So the failure is a great, I think, opportunity for this as well.
And one of the things I tell them is that how many of you have missed one question on an exam? And what do you remember about that exam? You remember the question you missed and remember the correct answer. All the other stuff just kind of flies. Oh, yeah, I know that. That's fine. But the thing you're going to remember is the one you missed. So it's actually a very useful learning tool.
Right.
So go fail. Have fun. It's good for you.
We have a couple minutes left only, so we started with great. I mean, we had our one key topic, public speaking. So not like to continue this later, but what could we take forward and develop in our classes that we learned today relative to public speaking and the different issues?
Basically, there's a lot of ways to encourage people to speak. Whether they present somebody else's opinion, the passing to the left and to the right, like that, or in small groups, or just by video or just audio. So there are a lot of ways to have people speak.
Regardless of the teaching modality, you can do something to positively have people speak. And again, if it's just people speaking via text, as Larry's getting at, you could expand on that and bring in multimedia if that's appropriate for your class. It's a good opportunity there. ISP down the road, we need to, Shane keeps saying, we need to do an ISP when we can do one in the future, but that's one I struggle with too, because I think like the speaking there is through writing, right? And so we're not getting that public speaking. We're talking about maybe down in the future, Chromebooks and having video if we can deal with the security issues. But that's
what's wrong
probably
with writing?
Writing's not bad, but you need speaking too. But writing's great, of course.
Well, I think you really need to keep in mind you are doing them a huge favor, lifetime favor, by getting them to communicate and state their ideas.
Right, absolutely. Okay, I think that's a good stopping point. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for those virtually. We're sorry about the Denny's Wi-Fi fiasco. We'll have to fix that next time. And thank you all for coming, and we'll do this again really